The boardroom fell silent as I signed the final acquisition papers. 37 years old, and I'd just bought out the construction company that had employed my father for 23 years. The same company where he'd bragged to every coworker about his failure of a son who'd never amount to anything. The irony wasn't lost on me as I looked through the glass partition at the warehouse floor below, where Dad was operating the same forklift he'd been driving since I was 14. You see, growing up in blue-collar Pittsburgh, success was measured differently than it is in my world now. My father, Frank Kowalski, believed real men worked with their hands, came home covered in concrete dust, and cracked open a Yuengling while watching the Steelers. College was for rich kids and dreamers, and anyone who wore a suit to work was soft. When I chose computer science over the family trade, I wasn't just disappointing him, I was betraying everything he stood for. But what he never knew, what nobody in my family knew, was that while he was telling everyone at Mahoney's bar that his son was a useless desk jockey, I was building something that would change everything. For 15 years, I kept one secret that would eventually flip our entire relationship on its head. The morning I bought Riverside Construction, Dad had no idea his new boss was the same disappointment he'd mocked at last month's family barbecue. He had no clue that the son he'd written off was about to become the person who signed his paychecks. And he definitely didn't know that this moment had been 15 years in the making, fueled by every insult, every dismissal, and every time he'd introduced me to his friends as my son who thinks he's too good for honest work. Today, I wasn't just buying a company. I was reclaiming my dignity. My father Frank embodied everything about working-class Pittsburgh, tough, stubborn, and fiercely proud of his Polish heritage. He'd immigrated from Krakow as a child with my babcia, who still made pierogi every Sunday and spoke broken English peppered with Polish curses. Dad worked construction his entire life, starting as a laborer at 16 and working his way up to foreman at Riverside Construction. To him, success meant providing for your family, owning your house outright, and earning respect through sweat and calluses. My mother, Susan, was the peacekeeper, a soft-spoken woman who worked part-time at the local elementary school and spent her evenings trying to smooth over the constant friction between Dad and me. My younger sister Katie was the golden child, marrying her high school sweetheart Tony right after graduation and giving my parents the grandchildren they'd always wanted. She lived 3 blocks away in a house identical to ours, perpetuating the cycle Dad valued so much. The humiliation started early. I was 12 when Dad decided to teach me real work during summer break. Instead of letting me go to computer camp like I'd begged, he dragged me to construction sites where his crew would watch him berate me for not lifting heavy enough loads or moving fast enough. "Look at this kid," he'd announce to anyone within earshot. "Soft as butter. Good thing he's got brains because he sure doesn't have muscle." The men would chuckle uncomfortably while I burned with shame, concrete dust mixing with tears I refused to let fall. High school brought worse humiliation. While my classmates' parents bragged about college acceptances, Dad would literally walk away when neighbors asked about my plans. At my graduation party, he told my uncle Stan, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Mike's going to Penn State for computers or some nonsense. 4 years and $40,000 to learn how to type faster." The whole backyard erupted in laughter. That night, I made myself a promise that would drive everything I did for the next 2 decades. But the grand gesture came during my junior year of college. I'd been accepted into an advanced programming internship with a startup in downtown Pittsburgh, unpaid, but incredible experience. When I called home excited to share the news, Dad's response crushed me. "So you're working for free now? Even McDonald's pays minimum wage, Mike. This is exactly the kind of stupid decision I expected from you." That conversation planted the seed for my secret. I didn't just want to prove him wrong. I wanted to flip the entire script. While pursuing my computer science degree, I started learning everything I could about the construction industry. Not the physical labor Dad valued, but the business side he never bothered to understand. I studied profit margins, supply chain logistics, project management software, and digital transformation in blue-collar industries. After graduation, instead of taking a high-paying tech job in Silicon Valley like my professors suggested, I deliberately took a modest position with a mid-sized company in Pittsburgh. I lived in a studio apartment, drove a used Honda, and let my family believe I was barely scraping by. Meanwhile, every spare dollar went into my real project, learning the construction business from the inside out, building connections, and slowly, methodically, planning something that would change everything. Drop a comment below and let me know where in the world you're watching this from. I love connecting with people who understand what it's like to prove doubters wrong, no matter what country or culture you're from. The family reunion was set for Labor Day weekend, 2023, a fitting irony that wasn't lost on me. Every year, the Kowalski clan descended on my parents' backyard in Brookline for what Dad called the real Pittsburgh experience. Folding tables covered in red checkered tablecloths, cases of Iron City beer cooling in galvanized tubs, and the smell of kielbasa sizzling on his ancient Weber grill that he refused to replace because it builds character. This year felt different from the moment I pulled into the driveway. Dad was holding court near the garage, surrounded by my uncles and cousins, all union guys who worked various trades around the city. I could hear him before I even got out of my car. "Wait till you meet Mike's new girlfriend. Sarah's some fancy lawyer from Shadyside. Probably makes more than he does." The group erupted in the kind of rough laughter that had soundtracked my childhood humiliations. Sarah squeezed my hand as we approached. She'd been warned about my family dynamics, but experiencing them firsthand was different. Within minutes, Dad had launched into his usual routine. "Mike here just got promoted to senior software developer," he announced with exaggerated air quotes. "Still don't know what the hell that means, but apparently it comes with a fancy business card and the same pay as a first-year electrician." Uncle Stan jumped in. "Remember when you wanted to teach him the trade, Frank? Kid couldn't swing a hammer without hitting his thumb." More laughter. My cousin Jimmy, who dropped out of high school and now worked as Dad's assistant foreman, added his own jab. College boys still afraid of getting his hands dirty. The tension escalated when Dad started showing off the family photo wall he'd recently updated. Pictures of Katie's kids, his bowling league trophies, newspaper clippings from local construction projects Riverside had completed. Notably absent were any photos from my college graduation, my professional achievements, or anything that acknowledged my existence beyond childhood birthday parties. "This is where real accomplishments go," Dad announced, tapping the wall. "Things that matter to actual people in the real world." Sarah's grip on my arm tightened. She could feel me tensing up. But then the external event I'd been orchestrating for months finally arrived. Dad's phone rang during his grand tour of the basement workshop where he kept his tools and memorabilia. The call was from his supervisor at Riverside Construction, informing him that there would be a major company announcement first thing Tuesday morning. All employees were required to attend. "Probably another safety meeting," Dad grumbled after hanging up. "New corporate nonsense about hard hats or some garbage. These desk jockeys keep finding new ways to waste our time with paperwork." Uncle Stan nodded knowingly. "Same thing happened at my plant last year. Some hotshot MBA comes in, changes everything that's worked for decades, then disappears when it all goes to hell." I couldn't help myself. Maybe it's good news. Could be new contracts, expansion plans. Dad's response was swift and cutting. "Mike, you wouldn't understand business decisions that affect real companies with real workers. Stick to your computer games." The backyard fell uncomfortably quiet. Even my usually diplomatic mother looked embarrassed. Sarah later told me she'd never seen such casual cruelty disguised as family banter. As the afternoon wore on, Dad's commentary grew more pointed. When Sarah mentioned her law practice, he made jokes about ambulance chasers. When I tried to contribute to conversations about current events, he'd interrupt with comments about book learning versus street smarts. The breaking point came during dinner when he stood up to make his annual Labor Day toast. "To the working men and women who built this country with their hands, not their keyboards," he declared, making direct eye contact with me. "To people who create real value, not whatever it is consultants and computer programmers pretend to do." If you're enjoying this story of ultimate family revenge, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers and your support means everything. Plus, you won't want to miss what happens next Tuesday morning when Dad discovers who his new boss really is. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom with Sarah beside me, I made the final decision. Tuesday's company meeting wasn't just going to be an announcement about new ownership. It was going to be the moment Frank Kowalski learned that his failure of a son had just become the most important person in his professional life. Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Pittsburgh weather that matched my nervous energy. I sat in my BMW in the Riverside construction parking lot, watching Dad's rusted F-150 pull into his usual spot. He climbed out wearing the same Carhartt jacket he'd owned for 15 years, hard hat tucked under his arm, completely oblivious that his world was about to implode. The company meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. in the main warehouse. I watched through my tinted windows as Dad joined his crew, guys he'd worked alongside for decades, sharing coffee from dented thermoses and complaining about Monday Night Football. Jimmy was there, along with the other foremen and supervisors who'd witnessed my childhood humiliation at various job sites over the years. At exactly 8:15, I walked through the main entrance wearing my best charcoal suit and carrying the leather portfolio that contained the acquisition documents. The receptionist, Maria, recognized me immediately. She'd been there since I was a kid visiting Dad at work. "Miguel? What are you doing here, Mijo?" she asked in her Puerto Rican accent, using the nickname she'd given me years ago. "I'm here for the meeting, Maria. Is everyone assembled?" Her confusion was obvious, but she nodded toward the warehouse where roughly 40 employees had gathered in folding chairs facing a makeshift podium. I could see Dad in the third row, arms crossed, that familiar scowl on his face as he waited for whatever corporate nonsense was about to waste his morning. I walked to the front of the room, and the murmur of conversation gradually died as workers realized they didn't recognize the man in the expensive suit. Dad's expression shifted from boredom to confusion when he saw me approach the microphone. "Good morning. For those who don't know me, my name is Michael Kowalski." A few heads turned toward Dad, registering the shared last name. "As of yesterday, I am the new owner of Riverside Construction." The warehouse erupted in surprised chatter. Dad's face went completely white, then red, then white again. I watched him process the information, his mouth opening and closing like he was trying to speak but couldn't find words. "I know this comes as a shock," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "But I want to assure everyone that jobs are secure, benefits will remain unchanged, and my goal is to modernize operations while respecting the craftsmanship and work ethic that built this company." Jimmy, my cousin who'd mocked my soft hands just 3 days earlier, was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Uncle Stan, who worked in the electrical division, kept looking between Dad and me as if trying to solve a puzzle. But Dad found his voice. "This is some kind of joke." He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the concrete floor. "My son couldn't run a lemonade stand, let alone a construction company." The room fell dead silent. 40 pairs of eyes watched this family drama unfold in real time. "Frank," I said, using his first name deliberately, "I understand this is difficult to process. But the paperwork is final, the bank transfers are complete, and I am now your employer." "Bullshit." Dad's voice echoed off the warehouse walls. "You live in some ratty apartment and drive a piece of shit Honda. Where the hell would you get money to buy anything?" This was the moment I'd rehearsed 1,000 times. The apartment was temporary. The Honda was a choice. For the past 15 years, while you told everyone I was a failure, I was building a software consulting firm that specializes in digital transformation for construction companies. Last year, we generated $4.2 million in revenue. Yesterday, I liquidated everything to buy the company where my father works, because I wanted him to understand exactly what his disappointment of a son was capable of achieving. The silence was deafening. You could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Dad's face cycled through emotions I'd never seen before. Disbelief gave way to recognition, then to something that might have been respect, before landing on rage. Pure, undiluted rage. "You did this to humiliate me," he said, his voice shaking. "In front of my crew, my friends. This is payback." "Noted. This is proof. This is me showing you that the son you've mocked for 37 years just became the most important person in your professional life." Every time you dismissed my intelligence, every time you laughed at my ambitions, every time you told people I'd never amount to anything, I was building toward this moment. I picked up my portfolio and walked toward the exit, pausing only to address the stunned workforce. There will be individual meetings scheduled throughout the week to discuss the transition. Maria has everyone's contact information and will coordinate schedules. As I reached the door, I turned back one final time. Dad was still standing in the same spot, surrounded by coworkers who didn't know whether to comfort him or congratulate him on having such a successful son. "Oh, and Frank," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Welcome to working for a keyboard jockey." The aftermath was immediate and chaotic. Within hours, my phone exploded with calls from family members who'd heard various versions of what happened at Riverside Construction. Katie was first, her voice a mixture of shock and concern. "Mike, what the hell did you do? Mom's been crying for 2 hours, and Dad locked himself in the garage and won't come out." Uncle Stan called next, his tone completely different from the dismissive attitude he'd shown at the barbecue. "Jesus Christ, Mike. I had no idea. The whole crew's talking about it. Some of the guys are actually excited. They've been saying for years the company needed fresh leadership. But your dad, man, he's not taking this well." The most surprising call came from Jimmy, my cousin who'd spent years echoing Dad's insults about my soft hands and college education. "Dude," he said, his voice filled with newfound respect, "that was the most savage thing I've ever witnessed. Half the crew thinks you're a genius, the other half thinks you're an asshole, but everyone agrees you just pulled off the ultimate power move." But it was Maria, the receptionist, who provided the most crucial information. "Miguel, your father didn't go home after the meeting. He's been sitting in his truck in the parking lot for 3 hours. I think he's in shock. Maybe you should." I drove back to Riverside that afternoon, finding Dad exactly where Maria had described. He was sitting behind the wheel of his F-150, staring at the building where he'd worked for over 2 decades, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I knocked on his passenger window. After a long moment, he unlocked the door. We sat in silence for several minutes before he spoke. "How long have you been planning this?" 15 years. Since you told me the internship was a waste of time." "Jesus." He rubbed his face with hands that were permanently stained with grease and concrete dust. 15 years of pretending to be broke while you were building, what did you call it? A $4 million company. 4.2 million in revenue. About 1.8 million in actual profit after expenses and taxes. More silence. Then, why construction? You could have bought any company, humiliated me anywhere. Why my workplace? The honest answer surprised even me, because this is where you're happiest, Dad. This is where you're respected, where people value your expertise. I didn't want to destroy that. I wanted to become part of it. I wanted you to see that I could understand your world, even master it, just through a different skill set. That conversation led to discoveries that changed everything. Dad revealed that he'd always felt insecure about his lack of formal education, especially around Sarah and other college-educated people in my life. His constant mockery wasn't just disappointment, it was fear that I'd outgrow the family and leave them behind. "Your mother kept telling me I was pushing you away," he admitted. "But I didn't know how to relate to someone so much smarter than me. Easier to convince myself you were wasting your potential than admit I was proud but didn't understand what you were doing." The revelation led to an unexpected alliance with my mother, who confessed she'd been secretly following my career through LinkedIn and business articles. "I knew you were successful," she said during a tearful conversation that evening. "I just didn't know how successful. Your father, he talks tough, but he's always been afraid of being left behind." Over the following weeks, something beautiful began to emerge from the chaos. Instead of the humiliation I'd expected to feel, Dad began showing genuine curiosity about the business side of construction. Our first official meeting as owner and employee evolved into a 4-hour discussion about inefficiencies he'd noticed, potential improvements to workflow, and his ideas for employee retention. "You know," he said during one of these sessions, "the guys have been talking. They're excited about the modernization plans, but they're also relieved it's you and not some outsider who doesn't understand construction culture." The grand gesture, my acquisition of Riverside Construction, transformed from an act of revenge into something neither of us had anticipated, a genuine partnership. Dad's decades of hands-on experience combined with my technological expertise and business acumen created opportunities neither of us could have achieved alone. But the most unexpected twist came 6 months later. During a routine review of company finances, I discovered that Dad had been contributing to a college fund for Katie's kids while taking on extra shifts to compensate for the overtime pay he was donating. The man who'd mocked higher education was secretly ensuring his grandchildren could afford university. Maybe, he said when I confronted him about it, I was wrong about a lot of things, including what kind of success matters. Today, Riverside Construction has expanded into 3 additional markets, implemented cutting-edge project management software, and increased revenue by 38%. Dad was promoted to Operations Director, a position that values his expertise while leveraging my business innovations. We've become partners in ways I never imagined possible. The healing wasn't instantaneous or complete. There are still moments of tension, still echoes of old patterns. But something fundamental shifted that day in the warehouse. Dad learned that intelligence comes in many forms, and I learned that respect can be rebuilt even after decades of damage. Looking back now, 18 months after that warehouse confrontation, I realized the real victory wasn't buying my father's company. It was discovering that revenge could transform into reconciliation. The son who was supposed to be too soft for the real world ended up saving the family business during the economic uncertainty of 2024. The father who thought keyboards were toys learned that technology could amplify the craftsmanship he'd spent his life perfecting. Last month, Dad and I presented our digital transformation case study at the National Construction Industry Conference in Chicago. Watching him explain to a room full of executives how my son's computer stuff had revolutionized project efficiency and worker satisfaction was surreal. The man who once dismissed my intelligence was now proudly showcasing our collaboration to industry leaders. The most powerful moment came during the Q&A when someone asked about our partnership dynamic. Dad's response floored me. I spent 30 years thinking my son didn't understand real work. Turns out I didn't understand real intelligence. Smart comes in different packages, and I was too stubborn to see that his brain was just as valuable as my hands. But perhaps the greatest transformation happened at Katie's daughter's graduation party last spring. Instead of the usual backyard barbecue, we hosted it at the Pittsburgh Technology Center, where my original consulting firm had been headquartered. Dad gave a toast that night that brought tears to my eyes. To my son Mike, who taught me that being wrong about someone you love isn't a failure, it's an opportunity to learn something new about what strength really means. The business metrics tell part of the story. Riverside Construction now employs 68 people, up from the original 40. We've completed projects in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Columbus. Employee satisfaction scores have increased by 42%, and we're being courted by national clients who want our unique blend of traditional craftsmanship and technological innovation. But the personal metrics matter more. Dad and I have lunch together every Friday to discuss business strategy and family news. He's teaching me welding in his garage workshop, something he'd never offered when I was younger. I'm teaching him basic coding principles, not because he needs them for work, but because he's genuinely curious about how software thinks. Sarah and I got engaged last Christmas, and Dad insisted on building our wedding arch himself, incorporating smart lighting I designed into the traditional woodwork he crafted. It's become a perfect metaphor for our relationship. His hands, my brain, creating something beautiful together. The lesson I want to leave you with isn't about revenge or proving doubters wrong. It's about the courage to redefine relationships that seem permanently broken. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are fighting their own battles with inadequacy and fear. Sometimes showing strength means being vulnerable enough to bridge gaps that seem unbridgeable. If this story resonated with you, I want you to do 3 things. First, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss stories about overcoming adversity and family transformation. We're building a community of people who refuse to let others define their limitations. Second, hit the like button if you believe that intelligence comes in many forms and that family relationships can be rebuilt even after years of damage. Your engagement helps us reach people who need to hear these messages. Finally, share this video with someone who's dealing with family dynamics that seem impossible to change. Sometimes knowing that transformation is possible is the first step toward making it happen. Remember, the people who doubt you today might become your biggest champions tomorrow, but only if you have the courage to show them who you really are. Don't just prove them wrong. Prove that being wrong about someone you love isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a better one.